The wind whipped at Abel's face as he followed the line of roaring Harleys into the night. The heavy leather coat on his back carried the Redwood Originals patch, but it felt like more than just a piece of clothing. It was a promise, a weight, a legacy. He kept close to Chibbs, who led the pack with the confidence of a man who'd survived more wars than he cared to count. The rest of the Sons rode tight behind him, their headlights cutting through the dark streets of Charming. They pulled into a clearing off an old back road, where another group of bikers waited under the moonlight. Their cooties bore the unmistakable insignia of the Mayans. The tension in the air was thick as Chibbs dismounted, motioning for the rest of the Sons to stay back. Abel followed suit, his heart pounding as he tried to read the situation. "Alvarez," Chibbs said, addressing the older man at the center of the Mayan pack. Marcus Alvarez, still sharp-eyed and calculating after all these years, stepped forward. "Chibbs," Alvarez replied, his tone neutral but firm. "I didn't come here for war, but if you keep pushing, that's what it'll be." "Pushin'?" Chibbs said with a cold chuckle. "You're the ones bringing outsiders into Charming. You know how that ends." Alvarez's eyes flicked to Abel, narrowing slightly. "Got a new recruit, I see. Looks familiar." Abel stiffened, but Chibbs waved him off. "He's none of your concern," Chibbs said, his voice like steel. Alvarez smirked. "He might not be now, but blood always finds its way into the fight." First blood. The meeting broke down quickly, as most confrontations with the Mayans did. Alvarez left with a warning. The Mayans weren't backing down, and if Samcro wanted to hold Charming, they'd have to fight for it. Back at the clubhouse, the mood was grim. The Sons had faced off against the Mayans countless times, but this time felt different. Abel sat in the corner, nursing a beer and trying to absorb everything he'd seen. "What did Alvarez mean about blood?" he asked, breaking the silence. Tig glanced at him, then at Chibbs. "Kid's got a point. That wasn't just posturing. He knows something." Chibbs sighed, his weathered face heavy with exhaustion. "The Mayans have been sniffing around old scars. Rumor is, they're working with someone from the past, someone with a grudge against us in the Teller name." Abel's chest tightened. "Against me? Against your da," Chibbs said. "But if they can't get to him, they'll come for you." The room fell silent. Abel didn't say it, but he felt a flicker of something dark, pride. His father's shadow loomed large, but it also shielded him. "Let him come," Abel said, his voice steady. "I'm not afraid." A week later, trouble came knocking. Abel was locking up the garage late one night when he heard the unmistakable growl of an approaching motorcycle. He stepped outside, his hand instinctively drifting toward the wrench on his tool belt. The bike stopped a few yards away and the rider dismounted slowly. He was tall and lean, with a face that carried the scars of a rough life. His kuda was weathered, the patches faded but still legible. Sons of Anarchy, nomads. "You Abel Teller?" the man asked, his voice low and gravelly. "Who's asking?" Abel replied, keeping his distance. The man smirked. "Name's Kane. Used to run with your old man." Abel's grip on the wrench tightened. "If you're looking for Samcro, they're not here." "Not looking for them," Kane said, stepping closer. "I'm here for you. Got something you need to hear. Something about your dad, and why the Mayans are so interested in you." Abel hesitated. "Why should I trust you?" Kane's eyes hardened. "You don't have to trust me, kid. But if you want to survive what's coming, you'll listen." Abel followed Kane to a rundown bar on the outskirts of Charming. They sat in a dimly lit booth, where Kane pulled out a folder stuffed with old documents and photographs. He spread them out on the table, tapping one with his finger. "This," Kane said, "is what the Mayans want." Abel leaned in, his eyes widening as he studied the image. It was a grainy photo of his father and a man Abel didn't recognize. They were shaking hands, but the tension in their faces was palpable. "Who's that?" Abel asked. "Diego Vargas," Kane said. "Used to run guns for the Galindo cartel. Your old man made a deal with him years ago, but it went south. Real bad. Diego disappeared, but now he's back. And he's got the Mayans in his pocket." Abel's stomach churned. "Why does he care about me?" "Leverage," Kane said simply. "Your dad burned him, and he wants payback. If he can't get it from Jax, he'll use you to hurt what's left of the Teller name." Abel returned to the clubhouse the next morning, his mind racing with Kane's revelations. He told Chibbs everything, watching as the older man's expression darkened. "Kane's trouble," Chibbs muttered. "Always was." "But if he's right," Abel began, "then we've got bigger problems than we thought," Chibbs finished. Before they could discuss it further, the clubhouse door swung open, and one of the younger members burst in. "Chibbs!" the man shouted. "We've got Mayans on the north side of town, about a dozen of them, and they're not alone." Chibbs grabbed his gun and looked at Abel. Looks like your first test as a prospect's coming sooner than expected. The sons mounted up, Abel riding near the back as they headed for the north side of Charming. His heart pounded with a mix of fear and adrenaline. He could feel the weight of the Kuti on his shoulders, the ghost of his father's legacy riding with him. As they approached the meeting point, the scene came into view. A line of Mayans, armed and waiting, flanked by unfamiliar bikers wearing dark Kutis with no recognizable patches. And standing at the front was a man Abel recognized immediately from the photograph. Diego Vargas smiled coldly, raising a hand to signal his men. "Welcome to the game, Teller," he called out. The rumble of engines quieted, the night still with tension as Chibs stepped forward. Abel stayed back, his fingers twitching toward the gun at his side. Then, without warning, a gunshot shattered the silence. The first gunshot tore through the air, sparking chaos. Abel hit the ground instinctively, his ears ringing as the Sons and the Mayans exchanged fire. Bullets sparked off asphalt, the sharp crack of gunfire mingling with the roars of motorcycles revving as cover. From his spot behind a parked car, Abel watched Chibs fire off a controlled burst toward the Mayans' position. The older man's voice carried over the chaos. "Abel, stay low!" But Abel couldn't stay put. He spotted Diego Vargas retreating toward the tree line, flanked by two armed bikers. His grip tightened on the pistol Chibs had handed him earlier. He could feel his father's legacy pushing him forward, driving him into the storm. Ignoring Chibs' orders, Abel bolted from cover and gave chase, his boots pounding the ground as Vargas and his men disappeared into the darkness. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Atlantic, a storm was brewing. In Belfast, Northern Ireland, a man stood in the shadows of a dusty old bar, his face hidden beneath a heavy hood. His name was Audan O'Shea, the son of Galen O'Shea, the infamous Irish kingpin whose life had been ended by Jax Teller's vengeance years ago. Audan had grown up in the shadow of his father's infamy, listening to hushed conversations about his death at the hands of the Sons of Anarchy. His mother had always told him to let the past lie, but Audan's hatred for the Tellers had only festered over the years. "They took everything from us," he growled, slamming a fist against the bar. An older man sitting nearby, one of his father's former allies, nodded grimly. "Aye, lad, but the Sons are spread thin now. If you want your revenge, the time's ripe." Audan smirked, his dark eyes glinting with malice. "Then it's time to finish what my Da started." With the remnants of his father's IRA connections, Audan began laying the groundwork for his vengeance. His target was clear: Abel Teller, the son of the man who had killed his father. Abel crashed through the trees, his breaths ragged as he pursued Vargas. The forest was pitch black, but he could make out the faint beam of a flashlight up ahead. He kept moving, his heart hammering with every step. Suddenly he tripped over a root and went sprawling into the dirt. His gun slipped from his hand, landing just out of reach. As he scrambled to grab it, a boot slammed down on his wrist, pinning him in place. "Brave kid," Vargas sneered, towering over him. "But stupid." Abel gritted his teeth, twisting under the man's grip. But Vargas's second man appeared, aiming a rifle squarely at his chest. "You've got your father's fire," Vargas said, crouching down to look Abel in the eye. "But you're not him. You don't have his strength, or his cunning." "You don't know me," Abel spat. Vargas chuckled darkly. "No, but I know what you'll do. You'll fight, and you'll bleed, just like he did. And in the end, you'll lose, just like he did." Before Vargas could finish his threat, a sharp whistle cut through the air, followed by the thunderous crack of a shotgun. One of Vargas's men went down, and the other spun around, looking for the source of the attack. Chibs emerged from the tree line, his shotgun smoking. "You picked the wrong family to mess with," he growled. Vargas cursed and bolted into the woods as Chibs helped Abel to his feet. "You all right, lad?" Chibs asked. Abel nodded, his jaw tight with determination. "We're not done. He's not getting away." Chibs clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Aye, but next time you listen to orders." Back at the clubhouse, the Sons regrouped. Abel sat at the bar nursing a whiskey, the adrenaline from the night's events still pumping through his veins. "That was reckless," Chibs said, taking a seat beside him. "I had to do something," Abel replied. "Vargas isn't just some rival. He's got a vendetta, and he's not stopping until we're all buried." Before Chibs could respond, the clubhouse doors swung open, and one of the younger members rushed in, his face pale. "Chibs," he stammered, "we've got a problem." "What now?" Chibs barked. The young man held up a phone, showing a video message. Abel's stomach churned as he saw the face on the screen. A man with striking features, his thick Irish accent unmistakable. "This message is for the Sons of Anarchy," the man said, his tone calm but deadly. "My name is Audan O'Shea, son of Galen O'Shea. Your sins against my family will be paid in blood. And Abel Teller, your time is coming. The video ended abruptly, leaving the room in stunned silence. Chibbs cursed under his breath, slamming his fist on the table. The bloody Irish. Abel frowned, his mind racing. Who's Galen O'Shea? Chibbs shot him a sharp look. He was one of the most dangerous men Sam Crow ever faced, and you're to put him in the ground. Looks like his boy's out for revenge. Abel clenched his fists, his anger boiling over. First Vargas, now this? What the hell is going on, Chibbs? Why is everything tied to my dad? Because your da made enemies, lad, Chibbs said. And now they're making you pay for it. Abel stood outside the clubhouse, staring into the night as the weight of his father's legacy pressed down on him. Vargas was still out there, and now Aodan O'Shea had painted a target on his back. You all right? Tig asked, walking up beside him. Abel didn't answer at first. Finally, he said, "This isn't just about me, is it? This is about the club." Tig nodded. The club's always been tied to the Teller name. Your dad, your granddad, it's all connected. Abel turned to Tig, his eyes blazing with determination. Then I need to be ready. If they're coming for me, I'm not running. I'm fighting. Across town, Vargas sat in a dimly lit warehouse, nursing a glass of whiskey as Aodan O'Shea stepped out of the shadows. "I thought you worked alone," Vargas said, eyeing him warily. "I do," Aodan replied, his Irish lilt sharp. "But we have a common enemy, the Sons of Anarchy, and more specifically, Abel Teller." Vargas smirked. "Then let's make them pay." The two men shook hands, sealing an alliance forged in hatred. The morning after the video threat, the Sons convened in the clubhouse, tension hanging heavy in the air. Chibbs stood at the head of the table, his face grim. Abel sat quietly, the weight of Aodan O'Shea's declaration still fresh in his mind. "This isn't just about Abel," Chibbs began, slamming a fist on the table. "This is about Sam Crow. We've got Vargas stirring trouble with the Mayans, and now we've got the Irish crawling out of the woodwork. We need to be ready for anything." Tig leaned back in his chair, lighting a cigarette. "You think O'Shea's got the manpower to make a real move? Last I heard, the Irish were scattered." Chibbs nodded. "Maybe. But if Vargas and O'Shea are working together, they could bring enough heat to burn this town down." Bishop, president of the Mayans Santo Padre chapter, appeared on a video call screen, having been brought in to mediate. The two clubs weren't exactly allies, but with mutual enemies at their doorstep, Chibbs needed information. "Vargas is slippery," Bishop said, "but he's been using Mayan resources to rebuild his reach. If he's got the Irish backing him now, you're in for a war." "Thanks for the vote of confidence," Tig muttered. "Just watch your back, Chibbs," Bishop warned. "We'll keep our boys out of Charming, for now. But if Vargas starts sniffing around our charters, all bets are off." The call ended, and the room fell silent. "What's the play?" Happy finally asked, his voice calm as ever. Chibbs looked at Abel. "We take the fight to them. But first, we need to know where Vargas and O'Shea are hiding." Determined to learn more, Abel volunteered to reach out to an old family contact, Nero Padilla. Abel had always trusted Nero, and while the reformed gangster had stepped away from the life, he still had connections that could be invaluable. Nero met Abel at a quiet diner on the edge of Charming. His face had aged, but his presence was as steady as ever. "You're in deep now, huh, mijo?" Nero said, his voice tinged with concern. Abel nodded. "They're coming for me, Nero. For my family. I need to stop them before it gets worse." Nero sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I heard whispers about Vargas. He's ruthless, but he's smart. If he's working with the Irish, that means they've got resources, money, guns, maybe even men. You sure you want to go down this road?" "I don't have a choice," Abel said. "If I don't, they'll destroy everything my dad and Chibbs have worked for." Nero studied him for a moment before nodding. "All right, I'll ask around, but be careful, Abel. This life, it'll take more from you than you realize." While Abel sought help from Nero, back at the clubhouse, the Sons were dealing with a new problem. A message had been intercepted. A supply line critical to Sam Crow's operations had been exposed to Vargas's crew. The leak was too precise to be coincidence. "We've got a rat," Chibbs growled. The revelation sent shockwaves through the room. Loyalty was the foundation of the club, and betrayal was the ultimate sin. "Any ideas who?" Tig asked, his tone dark. Chibbs looked around the room, his gaze sharp. "No, but I'll find out. And when I do, they'll wish they'd never been born." Nero's intel came through faster than expected. He'd tracked Vargas and Aodan O'Shea to a fortified warehouse on the outskirts of Oakland. It was a makeshift headquarters, guarded by both Mayan defectors and Irish mercenaries. The Sons geared up, knowing this wasn't just a retaliation. It was a statement. Abel stood in the lot, adjusting his gear nervously. This would be his first real confrontation as a prospect, and he could feel the weight of everyone's expectations. "You ready, lad?" Chibbs asked, stepping up beside him. "Yeah," Abel said, his voice steady despite his nerves. Chibbs patted his shoulder. "Remember, don't do anything stupid. Stick to the plan, and we all come out alive." The Sons rolled out, their bikes roaring into the night. The attack on the warehouse was swift and brutal. The Sons used the element of surprise, smashing through the gates and overwhelming the first wave of defenders. Abel stayed close to Tig and Happy, following their lead as the fight descended into chaos. Inside, the warehouse was a labyrinth of crates and corridors. Abel found himself separated from the others, his heart racing as he moved cautiously through the shadows. He turned a corner and froze. Standing a few yards away was Audan O'Shea, his face lit by the dim glow of a hanging bulb. "So you're the boy," Audan said, his Irish accent dripping with disdain. Abel raised his gun, his hands shaking slightly. "And you're the coward hiding behind his father's name." Audan smirked, stepping closer. "You've got your Daz fire, I'll give you that. But you've no idea what you're up against, lad. This isn't your fight." "It is now," Abel said. Before he could fire, the door behind him burst open, and Vargas appeared, flanked by 2 armed men. Abel was outnumbered and outgunned, but he didn't lower his weapon. "You've got guts, kid," Vargas said, "but guts won't save you." Gunfire erupted from the corridor as Chibbs and Tig appeared, mowing down Vargas's men in a hail of bullets. Audan and Vargas dove for cover, the room descending into chaos. Abel joined the fray, exchanging fire with Vargas as Chibbs and Tig pushed forward. The Sons gained the upper hand, but Audan slipped through a side door in the confusion. Chibbs grabbed Abel as the dust settled. "Go after him! He's yours!" Abel nodded, his heart pounding as he ran after Audan. The pursuit led Abel to the roof of the warehouse where Audan waited, a pistol in his hand. "You've got a choice, boy," Audan said, his tone mocking. "Turn around and go back to your cozy clubhouse. Or die here like your da should've." Abel aimed his gun, his finger hovering over the trigger. The weight of his father's legacy bore down on him, but he stood firm. "Your father made a mistake coming after mine," Abel said. "And now you've made the same one." Audan laughed, but the sound was cut short as the sound of roaring motorcycles echoed in the distance. Abel turned briefly to see the Sons surrounding the warehouse below, their lights casting long shadows across the rooftop. When he turned back, Audan was gone, vanished into the night. Back at the clubhouse, Abel sat alone, his mind racing. Vargas was dead, but Audan was still out there, and the rat inside Samcro was yet to be uncovered. Chibbs approached, setting a hand on Abel's shoulder. "You did good tonight, lad, but this fight's far from over." Abel nodded, his jaw tight. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." As the sun rose over Charming, a shadow fell across the lot. A black SUV rolled up to the gate, its windows tinted. The Sons watched cautiously as the door opened, revealing a man in a sharp suit with a faint Irish accent. "I have a message," he said, stepping out. "From Audan O'Shea." The man stepped out of the black SUV with calculated confidence, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored suit. The Sons of Anarchy stood ready, weapons within reach, their bikes forming an imposing semicircle around the clubhouse lot. Abel watched from the porch, his fists clenched. The man surveyed the group, his sharp Irish accent cutting through the tense silence. "Audan O'Shea sends his regards and a proposal." Chibbs stepped forward, shotgun in hand but pointed downward. "You've got a lot of nerve, lad, showing up here with a message from that snake. What's this proposal?" The man smirked. "Audan doesn't want a war. Not yet, anyway. He wants to meet. A truce, perhaps. Or terms for your surrender." Chibbs' eyes narrowed. "Surrender? To an O'Shea? You've lost your bloody mind." Abel spoke up, stepping beside Chibbs. "Where's the meeting supposed to be?" The messenger's gaze flicked to Abel, and his smile widened. "Ah, young teller. You've caught Audan's eye. He's quite eager to speak with you specifically. He's even willing to negotiate, if you come alone." The tension thickened. Abel glanced at Chibbs, whose expression darkened. "Not a chance in hell," Chibbs growled. The messenger shrugged, turning to leave. "Suit yourselves, but ignoring his offer will only bring bloodshed to your doorstep. And trust me, O'Shea isn't afraid to spill it." As the SUV pulled away, Chibbs turned to the group. "No one goes anywhere alone from now on. Happy, get a tail on that car. I want to know where it leads." Later that evening, Abel sat at the bar, nursing a whiskey. The club was abuzz with activity, preparing for whatever O'Shea's next move might be. But Abel's mind was elsewhere. The call-out felt personal, and he couldn't shake the feeling that this was something he had to face. Tig noticed the younger teller's brooding silence and slid onto the stool beside him. "Thinking about taking that little trip to meet O'Shea, huh?" Tig asked, lighting a cigarette. Abel glanced at him. "If I don't, he'll just keep coming. And if you do, you'll be walking into a trap," Tig said bluntly. "Your dad pulled moves like that. Always thought he could outsmart the enemy. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't." "I'm not my dad," Abel said. Tig exhaled a cloud of smoke. "No, you're not. But you've got that teller stubbornness. Just don't get yourself killed proving a point." Against Chibbs's orders, Abel made his decision. He left a note behind and rode out before dawn, heading for the location O'Shea's messenger had included in his ominous message, an abandoned shipping yard on the outskirts of Oakland. The lot was eerily quiet, the metal containers casting long shadows in the early morning light. Abel dismounted his bike, his pistol tucked under his coat. He didn't wait long. Odin O'Shea stepped out from behind a shipping container, flanked by two heavily armed men. His smirk was as cold as his father's, his eyes studying Abel like a predator sizing up prey. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," Odin said. "Coming here alone. Brave, but foolish." Abel squared his shoulders. "You wanted to talk, so talk." Odin chuckled. "You're a lot like your father. Headstrong, reckless. But you're missing one key thing he had, the club's respect. Right now, you're just a pawn in their game." "Say what you came to say," Abel snapped. Odin's smirk faded, replaced by a steely glare. "I want Charming. The town, the business, all of it. The Sons have had their run, but it's time for a new order. And if you hand it over willingly, I might just let you and your brother live to see another day." Abel's jaw tightened. "Not happening." Odin shrugged, pulling a pistol from his jacket. "Pity. I was hoping to avoid a mess." Before Odin could raise his gun, the sound of roaring engines filled the air. Abel's heart leapt as the Sons appeared, led by Chibbs and Tig, their bikes screeching to a halt in a cloud of dust. Odin cursed, signaling his men to open fire. Abel dove behind a container as bullets whizzed past him. The Sons returned fire, spreading out to flank the Irish and their mercenaries. Amid the chaos, Odin slipped away, disappearing into the maze of containers. Abel caught a glimpse of him and gave chase, adrenaline pumping as he navigated the labyrinth of steel. "Abel!" Chibbs shouted. "Stay with the group!" But Abel didn't listen. Abel cornered Odin near the edge of the yard where a motorcycle idled, ready for escape. Odin turned, his gun aimed squarely at Abel. "You're persistent, I'll give you that," Odin sneered. Abel raised his own weapon, his hand steady despite the rush of fear and anger coursing through him. "You're not getting away this time." Odin chuckled darkly. "You sure about that? Do you have it in you to pull the trigger? To cross that line like your father did?" For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Abel's finger tightened on the trigger, but doubt crept in. A sudden gunshot rang out, but it wasn't from Abel. Odin's body jerked as a bullet tore through his chest. He stumbled backward, blood spreading across his shirt, and collapsed. Abel turned to see Chibbs standing a few yards behind him, his smoking gun still raised. "You all right, lad?" Chibbs asked, lowering the weapon. Abel nodded, his heart pounding. "I had him." Chibbs approached, resting a hand on Abel's shoulder. "Maybe, but taking a life, it's not something you come back from. Your dad knew that better than anyone." Back at the clubhouse, the Sons celebrated their victory, but the air was heavy with unresolved tension. Odin was dead, but his connections and the threat of the Irish still loomed. Abel sat alone at the bar, staring at his drink. Tig joined him, clapping a hand on his back. "You did good, kid," Tig said. "Did I?" Abel asked quietly. "Or did I just make things worse?" Before Tig could respond, the door swung open and Happy stepped in, his expression grim. "We've got a problem," Happy said. "One of our guys found this at the lot." He held up a burner phone, its screen displaying a single message. "You killed my brother. Now it's war." Chibbs read the message aloud, his face darkening. "Looks like the O'Shea family's got more surprises up their sleeve." As the club processed the news, Abel felt a cold chill run down his spine. The fight was far from over. The clubhouse was silent as the weight of the burner phone's message settled over the Sons of Anarchy. Chibbs set the phone down on the table, his face hard as granite. "Looks like Odin wasn't the end of it," he said, his voice low. Tig leaned forward, his wild eyes scanning the faces of the group. "Who sent it? A brother? Cousin? Someone higher up in the IRA?" "Doesn't matter who," Happy said. "What matters is they're coming." Abel sat at the edge of the room, his thoughts swirling. He had thought killing Odin, or at least cornering him, would be the end of the Irish threat. Instead, it had only escalated things. He felt the gaze of the club shift to him, the weight of their expectations pressing down on him like a suffocating blanket. Chibs spoke up, his voice cutting through the tension. All right, first things first. We need to know who this message is from. Tig, reach out to our contacts in Belfast. See what the O'Shea family's up to. Happy, I want double the security on all our runs. And Abel looked up, his jaw tightening. Yeah? You're sticking close to me, Chibs said firmly. If they're gunning for you, we're not giving them the chance. 2 days later, Tig returned with answers. The O'Shea family's reach extended further than anyone had anticipated. The burner phone's message had come from Cormac O'Shea, Audhan's older brother, a seasoned IRA operative with a reputation for brutality. Word is, Tig said, addressing the group. Cormac's been running the Irish gun trade for years now. He's got the resources, the manpower, and a serious grudge against us. Chibs leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Jesus Christ, this is bigger than I thought. If Cormac's involved, we're dealing with more than just revenge. We're dealing with war. Abel stood, his fists clenched. Then we take the fight to him. The room went quiet. Chibs glared at Abel. You don't get to make that call, lad. This isn't a game. If we hit the Irish, we'll be dealing with fallout for years. I'm not saying we go in blind, Abel countered. But if we don't act, they'll keep coming. Let's think it through, Tig interjected. Cormac's not just some punk like his brother. He's calculated. If we're gonna take him on, we need leverage. Leverage came in the form of a surprising ally. Connor Malone, a former King's liaison who had worked with Jax Teller years ago. Now disillusioned with the Irish, Connor reached out to Chibs with an offer. He'd help the Sons take down Cormac in exchange for protection and a slice of Samcro's future gun pipeline. Why should we trust you? Abel asked when Connor met the club at a neutral location outside of Charming. Connor's icy blue eyes locked on Abel. Because I'm not looking to die for the O'Shea's, kid. Cormac's lost the plot. He's not just coming after you. He's making moves to take over the entire West Coast trade. The Mayans, the Russians, the Sons, you're all in his crosshairs. Chibs considered the offer. If you're lying, Connor, you won't live long enough to regret it. Connor smirked. Fair enough. But if you want to take Cormac down, you'll need to hit him where it hurts. His supply lines in Oakland. The Sons, with Connor's intel, planned an ambush on one of Cormac's key shipments. The operation was risky, but they needed to send a message. Abel rode with Tig and Happy, the tension palpable as they approached the docks under cover of darkness. The shipment was heavily guarded, with armed men stationed at every corner. The Sons moved in swiftly, taking out sentries with silencers before chaos erupted. Gunfire lit up the night as Abel and Tig stormed the main container. Inside, they found crates of high-grade weapons and something unexpected. Hostages. Abel froze as he saw 3 men bound and gagged in the corner. Who the hell are they? Abel asked, covering them as Tig checked the locks. Tig's face darkened. They're Mayans. Mayans, Abel repeated, his stomach sinking. Looks like Cormac's already making moves against them, Tig said. This just got messier. Back at the clubhouse, Chibs contacted Bishop of the Mayans. The revelation that Cormac was targeting both Samcro and the Mayans forced an uneasy truce between the two groups. You saved some of my guys, Bishop said over the phone. I owe you for that. But don't think this makes us friends. We're not looking for friends, Chibs replied. Just don't shoot at us when we go after Cormac. Fair enough, Bishop said. The turning point, as the Sons planned their next move, Abel struggled with his growing role in the club. He had proven himself in the ambush, but the violence weighed heavily on him. Wendy called one evening, her voice filled with worry. Abel, I heard about what's been happening, she said. This isn't what your father wanted for you. Abel sighed. I don't have a choice, Mom. If I don't fight, they'll destroy everything Dad fought for. You always have a choice, Wendy insisted. Just remember who you are. Abel hung up, her words lingering in his mind as he prepared for the coming storm. Connor's intel led the Sons to Cormac's main base of operations, an abandoned factory outside Stockton. The Mayans agreed to provide backup, but the Sons would take the lead. Abel rode with Chibs at the front of the pack, his heart pounding as they approached the factory. This was it, the moment where everything could change. The Sons hit the factory hard, breaching the gates and taking out Cormac's guards with ruthless precision. Inside, the firefight was intense, bullets ricocheting off steel beams as the Sons pushed forward. Abel found himself face to face with Cormac in the main office. The Irishman sneered as he raised his weapon. You think you can end this, boy? Cormac growled. Abel didn't hesitate. He fired, the bullet striking Cormac in the shoulder and sending him crashing to the ground. Chibs appeared moments later, finishing the job with a cold shot to Cormac's chest. Abel sat alone, his cut heavy on his shoulders.